Well, this is one of those days. So we're talking about understanding anxiety. And the two of our guests got stuck in, let me not qualify the traffic. I would have said anxious traffic, but I don't even know if that's the proper thing to say. But thankfully, he is here. What we want to talk about is, first of all, to help you understand the whole concept of anxiety. We understand that anxiety is a feeling of fear, of dread, or uneasiness. We're in the month of August. August ends today. September is the month of school fees. It is the month of anxiety for some people. We're drawing closer to the end of the year, which is the month, December is usually the month of house rent, another month of anxiety for some people. Maybe some are already living in this, but you know what? Let's get into the conversation of understanding anxiety with Miracle Ihuoma, who is a clinical psychologist. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you weren't too anxious getting here.
I was really. I was almost overcome by anxiety. Okay, would I be able to? Of course.
Okay, but
yeah.
So anxiety has a trigger. That's what you're saying.
Yes. Anxiety should have a trigger. And when no longer has a trigger, that's when we qualify it to be anxiety disorder.
Oh.
Yes, that's when it becomes a problem. Because anxiety, for instance, is a human feeling. Just like you said, it's a feeling of fear posed by imminent danger. So, for instance, I'm anxious because, I'm looking at where would I get school fees to pay for my children. But then when that becomes excessive, it becomes persistent and begins to affect my life, my interactions with other people, then it now becomes a disorder or an issue that you need to pay attention to.
School fees is quarterly.
Yeah.
Every 3 months. So you are telling me that cannot be, that's not frequent? It's something that happens every 3 months. Someone is going to pay school fees.
If you're always having anxiety over paying school fees, then something is wrong, either with your mental health or with your planning. You know, because if you know that you have to pay school fees every 3 months and then you're always anxious, so it means that that maybe your children they're in schools that they shouldn't be in the first place. You know, you shouldn't be having anxiety about paying school fees every time. Yeah, if it's a one-off situation, we know that yes, this is a one-off situation. But if it's something that happens every time, maybe you should take your children to a school where you don't have to have an anxiety to pay the school fees.
How about house rent? What if it happens? That one is once a year.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then the economy can sometimes eat it up. Like normally you would save X amount every month or X percentage of your salaries for your school fees, and then before you know what is happening, you're unable to meet up because inflation has, eaten up everything else that you're supposed to save. So where do we put that?
Yeah. Like I said, if it's a one-off situation, fine, I understand. Yeah, you're anxious because something went wrong. But if that's a yearly routine where you're always anxious about your house rent, then again, you might be staying in a house that is too big for you. You might need to look for your size where you don't have to always have that sort of anxiety to pay the house rent. Where you are sure that if I save X amount of money, no matter what happens, I would be able to pay this rent.
So it's not a disorder if it is occasional.
If it is occasional, if it doesn't begin to affect your daily life, your interactions with other people, it's okay. But when it begins to infringe on your lifestyle, begins to infringe on how you perform your daily activities, on how you interact with other people, then we might begin to look at a disorder. In fact, our DSM, which is a diagnostic statistical manual, says that that feeling has to be persistent for maybe up to 6 months, then we can qualify it to be anxiety. So if it lasts up to 6 months where you are having that constant feeling of fear and dread about whatever it is, then we might need to now check for anxiety disorder.
No, it's very interesting because it's something I don't think we can even avoid some of the signs. Is it, for instance, what are the signs? Let me ask you. What are the signs of anxiety disorder?
A disorder?
Yeah.
Now, we have different categories of anxiety disorders.
Oh.
Yes. So anxiety disorder.
Can we start from JS1? Start from the lowest.
Anxiety disorder is like an umbrella. So it's the same way we have mood disorders, where depression falls under. So anxiety disorder is like an umbrella. That's where we have things like selective mutism. That's where we have things like social anxiety disorder. That's where we have general anxiety disorder. That's where we have post-traumatic stress disorder. That's where we have obsessive compulsive disorder. That's OCD. All of this, that's why we have panic disorders as well. All of these are all anxiety disorders. So when we say diagnosing someone for anxiety disorders, it is not generic. It has to be for one of these several anxiety disorders. So usually, if it is about, say, work, about finance, about school, and what have you, it would most likely fall under general anxiety disorder.
So, anxiety sounds like anything that has to do with fear.
Yes.
So all those phobias.
Yeah, specific phobias too are under anxiety disorders. So every form of phobia, because phobia is defined as irrational fear. Yeah. Yeah. So when fear becomes irrational, it is a phobia. So that in itself as well is an anxiety disorder.
So fear of cockroach, for instance.
Irrational, because cockroach is not posing any danger to you.
Ah, who says?
What danger does cockroach pose?
Have you seen the movie Beetle?
Well, I haven't.
Go not to make light of, because someone is actually listening now and is actually, for instance, I'm on mayoclinic.org now, and they're talking about feeling of nervousness, restlessness, or tenseness, a sense of impending danger, panic, or doom, an increased heart rate, breathing rapidly, sweating, trembling, feeling weak or tired, trouble concentrating or thinking about anything, having trouble sleeping, having difficulty controlling worry, which is a normality for some people, having the urge to avoid things that trigger anxiety. Now, is this just a few, or all of them have to happen? Because there are those who are menopausal and they have some of these signs. There are those who, for some reason, they have a few of them that are persistent and continuous. Does that make them fall into anxiety disorder? Yeah,
and that's why in diagnosis, we have to rule out some other things. So it has to be that, okay, this anxiety is not happening because, for instance, like, it's not happening because of school fees, or no, not even school fees. It's not happening because of, say, menopause, like you said, or even a drug. Because sometimes certain medications can induce anxiety.
Some of these things.
So if we have to eliminate all of those instances before we can now diagnose somebody to have anxiety disorder, because some of these things can actually cause people to have, anxiety. And when it even comes to all of the symptoms that you mentioned, as is the same with every other disorder that we have in mental health and in psychology, there has to be a certain number. The person has to meet a certain diagnostic criteria before they can be diagnosed. So for anxiety, I think the person has to meet about 5 or 6 of the symptoms, and then those symptoms have to be persistent over a period of about, say, 6 months before you can now say this person has a particular type of anxiety.
At what point does any individual say, I think I need to see a doctor?
Yeah. At the point where you know that, because remember, we define anxiety as fear or dread over imminent danger. When you know there's no imminent danger and yet you are still feeling the symptoms of anxiety, then there's a call for concern. So or you are feeling the emotion of fear, dread, and what have you, over something that should normally not cause you to be scared, normally not cause you to be anxious, and you're anxious over it. For instance, because I'm coming to, there are people, for instance, because they're coming to channels, television, they become unnecessarily anxious. Yes, there's a bit of nervousness that might come. Maybe because, the whole world is listening to them. They're facing the camera. It can affect, them, or people are speaking to a crowd or a group of people and they feel anxious. Because they don't want to be socially scrutinized. Yeah. All of that, you can have a level of nervousness, right? But when it becomes excessive, one that you can no longer control, it becomes visible to everybody that this person is anxious, or you begin to make obvious, mistakes as a result of that, then you know that, okay, there's an issue here you need to work on. Yeah. You become awkward in social situations, you become tensed because, there are people, for instance, who have social anxiety. They become tensed when they're interacting with other people, and all of that. That is a call for concern. So when you see any of these things, then you want to say, okay, maybe I need to talk to a professional about this.
Where do you place a situation where parents are just anxious about the kind of life their children will live? The kind of world they're bringing their children into. Is that a rational or irrational fear?
It is an irrational fear. Why is it an irrational fear? Because, now, I tell people there are two types of problems. There are real problems, there are emotional problems, or imagined problems. So, if you have, or what we can also call, there are real problems, also called practical problems. A practical problem is a problem that you can do something about. It's a problem that is stopping you from achieving your goal. That's a practical problem. And practical problems have practical solutions. That's where problem solving comes in. So that's why I usually encourage people to develop problem solving skills. Because in life, problem is a constant K. You're either in a problem, coming out of a problem, or going to a problem. Everybody belongs to one of these three categories. So you need to develop problem solving skills. But then there's another problem, which is a problem that is an emotional problem. Many times, emotional problems are problems we create for ourselves. They are caused by imagined problems. So, for instance, how will my children turn out? The question would be, is there anything you can do about them turning out well? Yes. So why are you still worried about it? If there's something you can do to make sure that whatever it is, whatever challenge they go through or they face, they still come out on top. So you now have, so I tell people that when you create imagined problems for yourself, you actually double your problems. So let's assume that it's even a real problem. Let's assume that somebody right now has a child that has turned out badly. Now that's one problem. You becoming anxious over what is already a problem doubles your problem. So you have the real problem, which is your child who has turned out badly, and now you have a mental health problem as well, accompanied with that. So you want to make sure that one problem that you have, you stick with the one problem that you have and look for possible solutions for that problem. Because there is a way, for instance, to even mitigate the challenges that you're foreseeing in this world for your children. How? By preparing them, by making sure you go the extra mile to prepare them. Because no matter how bad the world is, there would always be remnants. There will always be people who are good. There will always be people who turn out well, no matter how bad. Generations past and present has told us and showed us that no matter how bad it is, in America, there are people who still get married as virgins. So it doesn't matter where you are. There are people who would still do the right thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Godwin is asking a question. Says he has a friend who is addicted. I hope this is not an addiction problem. To playing football bets. And always there is this look on him when he loses a game. Clearly, you can imagine. So he's asking what can be done to help his anxiety in this situation.
Is that anxiety? That would most likely be because anxiety usually happens when you are foreseeing a problem, not after you have had a problem. Most likely, that is sadness.
He's not supposed to foresee that he
you most likely lose. Yeah, it's a bet in the first place.
Okay.
So that's having too much expectations, actually, unrealistic expectations.
Okay.
For the guy, and most likely he's experiencing sadness.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's this. You spoke about parents earlier. I just wanted to quickly take that one. Now, how about the children themselves, the young people? Most young people out there they're disillusioned. They don't know what the future holds. Some live depressed. Some are anxious every day. What will tomorrow bring? What's going to happen to me tomorrow? They don't even know. They don't have a forecast into any future. So they literally, perpetually live in anxiety. But because they are young, no one would imagine that a young person would be having that kind of experience or a disorder going on. What would be your counsel?
Yeah, for every child, it's the same thing as a parent. Number one is have a vision. Because when you have a vision of where you're going, somehow vision instills hope. Because you know that, okay, even if no matter what I'm going through, no matter what is happening with me right now, there's where I'm going to. So vision helps you to have a hope for the future, right? And that's even what the concept of the future is. Because in the real sense of it, there is nothing like the future. The future is just God's way of, keeping our hope alive. Because today is yesterday. Today is the tomorrow you talked about yesterday. So if you have a vision for your life and you have a picture of where you are going, it keeps hope alive. It makes you know that no matter what it is, my future is going to turn out well. And the next thing you want to do is to also plan alongside the vision that you have.
That planning. There is no problem with planning. There is no problem with envisioning.
Yeah.
It's the movement.
The movement, yeah.
What am I going to do to get to that future?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to see it. You see it. You've seen everyone else do it. And then you plan. You think that it is something that you should be able to do. Planning is not the problem. Getting it done. That's the problem.
It might shock you to know that many young people don't have a vision. If you go around and ask 10 young people, where do you see yourself in the next 10, 15 years? I can bet you that out of 10, most times you would have less than 3 who would give you a clear picture of where they see themselves.
Really?
Yes. For a lot of young people, just anywhere belly face. They'll just be going, whatever happens. You say, I feel like in this economy, in this Nigeria, let's just be going, whatever happens. A lot of them don't have a vision. So for some that have visions, some of them don't have a plan, a step-by-step process, strategy on how to get that vision. To say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Step 1, I'm going to get a degree in this area. Step 2, I'm going to get a mentor here. Step 3, I'm going to get a job, work for 3-5 years. And afterwards, step 4, I'm going to, start my own establishment or what have you. A lot of them don't have that step-to-step plan. Okay. Because that in itself mitigates a lot of the anxiety that one would have. Yeah. For instance, personally, I came from a humble background. But one of the things that kept me going was the vision that I had. I know that, okay, there's somewhere I'm going. So I had a mental picture. So whatever challenge I was going through at the time, because of that vision that I had, it helped me to go through the challenge happy and excited, even though I knew it was a challenge, because I know that someday I'm going to come out of this challenge and I'm going to help a lot of other people come out of the same challenge. Yes. Okay. And like you said, movement, of course. But many times, because it is direction that should precede movement. Because when you don't know where you are going, movement becomes irrelevant. Yeah, because no matter how far you go on the right direction, it doesn't make it the right path. So it's very important that you have a vision, you have a plan, and of course, movement can now follow the vision and the plan that you have.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. I'm sorry we had to put you through that. By the way, can we ask the Lagos State government, particularly in Lagos, most of the traffic people are experiencing this morning is induced by fuel queues at fuel stations. Yeah. In many cases, they are doubling the queues. It's just the main fuel queue, and then there are others who want to shunt in front of the other people, and they accumulate traffic along the road. So please, let the Lagos State government, and this is happening on major highways, please let the Lagos State government do something as quickly as possible on this particular matter. Thank you again, Miracle Ihuoma.
Thank you very much, sir.
Psychologist, for your time. Well, back right after now, and I know the matter is not a laughing matter, but whether or not you will, I guess we'll see when this break is over.